Good morning.
Morning.
Or in my case, afternoon.
Are you in NZ?
Good guess. Hence why I'm wearing a beanie. Yeah, another minute or so.
Angus is on leave, isn't he?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
drinking beer and hanging out next to the swimming pool. Or maybe not. Maybe he's gone on a retreat. Let's think of it as he's gone to reach some form of higher level of consciousness.
That's the one, yeah. Always associated Angus with higher level.
Well, he did do that India trip.
He did indeed.
So, he's close to me.
Yeah.
You ready? You good to go, David?
Yeah.
All right. I shall share my screen. All right, welcome everyone, all 20 of you. I guess first of all, just welcome everyone. acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands in which we meet, which for me is New Zealand. So the Maori people in New Zealand, or even going back, it's Maoris before them, but that gets complicated. Today we're going to start out with approval of previous minutes. So these are the minutes from 2 weeks ago. Thanks to David McKillop for helping put them together. Has anyone had a chance to look through them? I know I did this morning. If so, can someone please motion accepting the minutes?
I'm happy to move the minutes.
Give a second.
Alrighty, thank you, gentlemen.
Was that Jai second?
It was.
He was.
Today is looking to ground out the discussion that Angus led a
We're
couple
going
of
to
weeks
vote
ago.
on that, Andy, sorry.
Oh, the minutes.
Yeah. So,
Yes, good idea. Thanks, David. All right, everyone, does anyone wish to abstain? Please raise your hand.
that's 6.
Lucy, 7.
I see 7.
Okay, 7.
Okay, everyone lower your hands. Cool. Anyone wish to vote against the motion for the minutes? No? Okay, that's a 0, which by my calculation, subtracting me, would be 12.
Oh, that's right there. Good. 12. Thanks.
Thanks for the reminder, David. So today we're going to revisit the specimen scope that Angus talked about a couple of weeks ago. We're going to vote on a motion to accept the bundle approach, which I also presented. And then if we've got time, we shall have a brief conversation about transfer of fulfillment, which is the big piece of work going forward that we will do after these first two are under our belt. Does anyone have any additional things they want to put on the agenda for today? Nope. I don't know, before we start, David, do you or Michael want to say anything about the international O&O?
No, it's pretty well. Yeah, our attendance is pretty well ceased. We've got to a stage where we've developed some words, and it's not completely right, but it's a good basis to go to ballot. Otherwise, we'd just keep on going round in circles. Not so much circles, but refinements. And I think the next stage is to see what comes out in ballot and make sure we comment on that, so that there's two ways of doing it: the EU way and the US, which US/AU way. And yeah, we just got to make sure that there's nothing that precludes us from doing the way we want to do things.
David, the wordings that we propose, are they against the diagnostic report resource, or are they against the observation resource?
I think it's diagnostic report. I'll find the link and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I probably would add, not to that, but for something else, is that there was a terminology working group meeting the last couple of days, and the terminology working group is trying to progress their implementation guide project, and there has been some questions raised to the TSC, AU TSC, around terminology working group and how they're going to go about their work. I think there has been some attempt in the meeting last couple of days to soften some of the language in the project description. So there was, I think, some language which implied that the terminology working group would, well, potentially it could be read as a kind of hostile takeover of terminology artifacts that other working groups are working on. And I don't think that was at all the intent of the terminology group. The new wording for that project is more around creating some meaningful processes and opportunities for work groups and projects to, what I like to look at is offload some of the terminology effort into the terminology work group to support the maintenance of those terminology artifacts. See, with terminology, we have traditionally kind of had a lot of dependency on both the NCTS AU base to provide us some of the building blocks. And I think there will be a period of transition and discovery to figure out how the terminology work group can better support us. There have been, I guess, some issues in the past where, for instance, the NCTS changed the terminology artifact from underneath us. And those kind of things, I think, can be better averted if we have a dedicated terminology group who feeds and waters those terminology artifacts, and we as eRequesting can, in theory, have a trusted relationship to that terminology work group. And hopefully we don't then need to be putting a lot more effort into looking after those terminology artifacts, and where there is an opportunity to share terminology across projects and work groups, that the terminology work group will actually actively work on making sure that that is a meaningful way forward for all parties involved. Anyway, that's just a heads up to say that the terminology work group is finding its feet, and they do not have any intent to proactively steal or take terminology artifacts out of work groups and projects, but instead offer an opportunity for those artifacts to be placed into the kind of the processes of the terminology work group as they come about, and they will come to talk to us at some stage about how that all might work going forward. Does that all make sense to everyone? Mr. David.
Andy, I was only going to add that we're college pathologists and RANSCA are currently working with CSIRO about a terminology development, maintenance and release process, which will then become published so we can actually share with you guys and with the terminology working group, you know, how that actually happens in reality. Because at the moment there's several ways of requesting new terms, including coming to us and coming directly to the NCTS. So we're trying to work our way through what that process looked like as a common process. Just thought I'd add that.
Sounds good. I'm sure that terminology work group will borrow parts of that to help them out too. Any other questions around terminology? Nope. Okay. We might jump straight into specimen. So for those of you who have been playing along at home, there were 4 options put on the table. This, I should say up front, is not intended to define the actual design of how these 4 options would be used with an implementation guide, but more this is purely looking at a scope issue, and whether which of these scope options we should look to take on in the work that we do in eRequesting R2. Do you want to talk through these, Michael? I'd be happy to, but I'll give you a go.
I guess I've done a little bit of pre-work on this, and in my mind, we're talking about the specimen that's in your hand. This gives us, a surgeon collects a biopsy or it's a swab or something like that. Because the way eRequesting set up at the moment is with a pre-coordinated code for service request, and it might just say, I think the example from Angus was like wound swab, but really we don't have enough information about that from the pre-coordinated code, so we need that extra information. And I think specimen, as it's collected, gives us that information. I do have a couple of slides that might
Excellent.
Show that.
I shall stop sharing.
That's all right. Now, I didn't plan to share this, but I thought, why not? So this is option 2. And so I've got a little test app, which I thought, okay, here's a good example. Histopathology test. Tick the box, you get all the details from the specimen. And then you get the specimen type, which is tissue from skin. It was a shaved biopsy, and it might have been from the upper arm, left upper arm. And then importantly, time and data collection. And so that would all go in the file bundle, and the specimen points at the service request, and it's all sort of grouped up in the task. You see that bit there. And then it would come back to what's the important information we need to capture. So in my mind, the mandatory kind of things you'd need to capture are type, collection date, and there's some other things that are useful, but maybe not mandatory. But that's what's in my mind. But there was some comments from Vince about a 5th option, I think, but I'm not quite sure if Vince is here.
I was keeping an eye out for him, but I didn't see him on the list.
I think Vince's was talking about a collection center option. I'm not sure that's in scope for this, but happy for someone to argue for that.
Yeah, I think Dave McKillop's included some of those questions from Vince. So Vince email, I note that specimen option 2 described by Angus in the minutes is labelled as collection centre. We had a chat about this in the co-chair meeting. The reason it was labelled collection centre, which would imply that it's actually a description of a specimen that is taken at a collection centre, is that it was due to something I said in the captured text from the meeting last time. I think it was taken out of context by AI. So the intent was certainly not to say that this was to be added into the request at the collection centre. The option 2 was always intended to be a specification of the specimen that is created at the time of the service request, not in the fulfillment process. So when he says, I think it's actually more applicable to patient and provider specimen collection, that was exactly the intent of option 2. I think he's saying that the collection centre collection could be a fifth case. And in terms of the 4 options, It is true that you could probably define a fifth option with a separate specimen identification or information that is part of the collection center data. But one of the things we decided on over the last couple of years is that I think the service request and the fulfillment is kind of quite a strict delineation of information scope. And if something is associated with the fulfillment of a diagnostic request, then it doesn't live in the service request, it lives in the fulfillment part, which is really linked off the task. So the argument would be with specimen information, if it was going to be created as part of collection center activity, then that would be part of the fulfillment process and then would likely be attached to the task that's representing fulfillment as one of the outputs of fulfillment. It could then be reused, for instance, in option 4. So in generating the report, that report could link to a specimen resource that was linked off the task, for instance. So normally we never got up to talking about reporting. That's another project we've talked about for this year. In terms of reporting, you could add the report as an outcome or an output from fulfillment, which would mean it'd be task.output, and that list of artifacts to get built from fulfillment. One of them could be a report, but one of them could also be a specimen.
Andy, aren't you creating a problem if you because the consent process is really presenting for the specimen to be taken, so it's before fulfillment. So I think that's a whole different consideration. But I just think you need to be aware that you're mixing in the consent process then.
Yeah, we don't include at the moment a consent resource, I don't think.
No, and that's why I'm raising the alert. Just be aware.
Yeah, so I think that would be an interesting question. You could certainly, in terms of fulfillment, you could certainly have a consent resource as an input into fulfillment. So to say that you consent to a specimen being collected, but then you would also what does that mean for a practice specimen collection? And I don't know, Michael, if you've looked at whether specimen has any reference or relationship to consent. I can't.
No, I've not looked at that at all.
Yeah, it's a good point. We certainly wouldn't be ruling it out. I think at this stage we just wouldn't be creating a way forward with that. But again, it's I think that's why with these 4 options, we have in this eRequesting, as opposed to reporting work or fulfillment work, we have really not tried to look at taking up the specimen used on the side of the filler, but we're more looking at specimen as part of a request. And that's why we have kind of moved towards option 2, which was really the driver in the first place, which was there was a request that was created and there was a specimen collected in the practice. And at that point, we didn't have any way of documenting that specimen in the old requesting or in 1.0 of the eRequesting spec. So we at least wanted to be able to include information about practice collected specimens. That would include patient provided specimens. So we could cover off those two to say that it's information that exists at the time of creating the request. So that was kind of our mindset at that stage. The second kind of layer that was associated with the request was option 1, which was really about if you knew that there was guidance you wanted to give around the specimen that was required to be collected, then how do you do that and associate it with the request? And it's in newer releases of FHIR, there is actually a very specific extension for intended specimen. Or do you remember what it's called, Michael?
I think it's called suggested specimen.
Suggested specimen. So it's basically saying, and that the wound swab's an excellent one, is that if you've got a wound swab that you want taken on the, let's say left hand, and you weren't going to do it in the practice, you weren't going to do it, the patient wasn't going to do it, but you wanted them to go to a collection centre and have that wound swab taken, or let's say another, to the provider and have that wound swab taken, then you could specify that location within the suggested specimen extension, and that would cover off the other kind of bit of service request based specimen information. Does that make sense to everyone? Yes, question.
Sorry, Andy, is that to me? It's Yoni. Thanks again for that explanation. Just a quick question. So just a couple of practical examples, if we just run through those just to help ease the thing. So if a patient brings out a 24-hour urine collection that they sometimes need to do, they wouldn't typically nowadays bring it up to the GP practice. They'll bring it to whatever the OVH or whatever the GP allocated, to have that collected. So that's one example. So what details would be provided? Would we have the provider number, presumably of the GP that requested that, or the specialist, whoever that was, the practice being the Dovich Center that was the responsible for the collection. Then when we talk about time, are we talking about it's a 24-hour urine collection brought in by the patient? So what time are we actually capturing in that instance? And then and what gets uploaded, what is part of what we're demonstrating as part of that time and date collection. Another practical example is, but a brain tumor specimen collected in theater. There's usually a pathology request that's usually so completely honest, usually the surgeon's provider number. That is typically the most you can capture there. And then there is obviously the hospital, there is the theater, there is the pathology that may or may not be affiliated with the hospital, because it could be an external provider. So again, in that example, what are we capturing from the aspect of the site, being obviously a brain tumor, etc. From the provider point of view, are we just capturing the consultant's provider? Are we capturing the hospital's provider? Are we capturing the pathology? Are we capturing that it's in theater? And then the last example is probably more the one that we referred to already in this discussion, which is, some kind of shave biopsy that is happening in a practice or in a particular center. I would argue that that's probably the easiest one that we probably discussed at length. So just want to bring those three and sort of see how we tackle them with existing options, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Michael's got his hand up because he wants to answer.
I can only probably answer the first one, but I'll just quickly jump to my screen. So just showing you collected. So collected can be a date
Happy
time
to
or it can be a,
clarify any of the points, by the way.
sorry. Is that okay? Is
I was
that
just
you
saying I'm happy to clarify any of those points.
I missed that, sorry, but I was just going to say collected can be a date, time, or a period. So that a period has a start and a stop date. So that takes into account your 24-hour urine. I don't have an answer for the other ones. They're all things we could test out though.
I do. I have
stop sharing
answers. So one of the question about the theatre pathology, we have up till now limited our scope to community-based requesting, not hospital requesting. So we don't really have theatre pathology requests that, I mean, unless they are being filled within the community as opposed to within the hospital pathology system, we haven't bitten off hospital-based pathology requesting at this point in time. I don't think there's anything necessarily that would preclude capturing kinds of information you were talking about, but I think the bigger issue is the actual workflow of how it's managed would probably be more a question for us, and that the assumption we've made around, for instance, we're going to talk at some point about the whole patient choice and transfer of fulfillment and stuff. A lot of that stuff is not really going to make sense within a hospital-centric eRequesting solution for pathology. The question, I think, the first part is actually quite interesting, where you've got a 24-hour urine collection that is, and what the difference then is instigating that. Is that ever instigated by the requesting clinician in terms of the specimen collection, or will it always be the case that you would go to the collection centre, they would then give you the directions around the specimen collection, and then you would loop back to the collection centre with the sample?
And normally the provider provides the collection a tube or jar, whatever it is, and then tells the patient, and then the patient drops the collected specimen off at a collection centre, it being the point of contact for a pathology lab. So it's not actually the collection centre that initiates the collection normally, I would have thought, rather the provider or the requester.
Okay, so you're saying requester as in the requesting clinician?
Yep.
Now, I'd be surprised if the requesting clinicians, in the case of urinary 24-hour urinary collections, there's usually some sort of additive added to the bottle, so to preserve whatever analyte they're trying to test for, and I think that might be beyond the realm of the requesting clinicians' stock of bottles and stuff that they might have.
Yeah, I could certainly see a once-off sample taken at the requesting clinician's practice, and then that being the sample collection and it then being sent off. But I guess I'm kind of throwing anything that was a sample instigated through the collection centre, I'm throwing into that's a fulfillment sample. And therefore kind of going, we at the moment are putting that out of scope. We're only looking at specimen information that's associated with the original request. And that could either be, those first two options are, so it's completely controlled by the requesting clinician or the practice, and that if they give you a specimen jar or something, and actually round trip the collection within the practice, I'm just not sure whether there's ever an occasion where the collection sits across the requesting clinician and the collection center. So whether you instigate the collection within the practice and then you provide the sample to collection center. I never heard of that option. Am I off on a limb here?
You're not off on a limb, but I think we've got to be careful that we're not excluding the other options because that's our opinion. So we're going to go to a vote at some point. But I think the scoping stuff is up to everybody here.
Yeah, I'm certainly not saying that that collecting specimen information during fulfillment and fulfillment covering collection center and the lab. I'm certainly not saying that we're saying you're not allowed to store or collect specimen information at that point. I guess all I'm saying now is at this point, we would only be providing guidance for the request part of the specimen dataset, and at some point in the future, we, in fulfillment, for instance, may look to provide direction in how specimen collection from a fulfillment perspective may be added into the data set during fulfillment. Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. Look, that clears up. I mean, if we leave, as I said, the hospital example aside, but again, because of the point that you just made about fulfillment, we need to cover that, or at least have that in the back of our minds, because if we make it too strict, we'll forget that is one of the biggest of specimen collection points that matter to the patient's perspective, yeah, especially those times. So we do need to think about it. From point of view of your other point as to, okay, again, we'll leave the fulfillment aside and just give instructions at the request point. That's fine, but going back to my point, what details would you provide if, let's say, we'll make it not a 24-hour urine collection, but as a GP just requested urine, midstream urine, and you've done it in my practice, and you've returned the bottle. I'm giving it off to Dovich, or even walked to Dovich across the road and done that urine, specimen and gave it to them. So again, what details in that very specific example we would expect to have collected?
So we are not at the moment making that decision. We are going to discuss that going forward. What we wanted to do at this point is to get some agreement in terms of the scope of what workflows we're actually going to include in this. And the first point was to say we're going to concentrate on the requesting side of the workflow, and we're going to allow for, well, my suggestion, and hopefully someone will put forward as a motion, is that we will certainly include practice collected specimens as in option 2. And I would also say that it would be useful at the same point to do option 1, which is the suggested specimen information provided at the point of request. What exact information we include in both of those options is we're not deciding that yet. And so those examples you talk about is exactly the kind of thing that will help us determine the information. So Michael did put some suggestions down. I think that's just kind of indicative. That's not a decision we're making today. There's also things like, for instance, if there is a identifier or an ID or some kind of label that is associated with the container that you might be using for the specimen, in case you are including 2 specimens in the request. Maybe that label identifier would be a useful bit of information as well. But again, I'm not kind of saying that that's going to be in or out at the moment. I just really want to get the scope in, and I guess I'm trying to say that 3 and 4, both of those are more on the side of fulfillment and the lab kind of processes. And at the moment, I want to put those to the side and concentrate on the request. It is the majority of what was driving the need for this work. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
So option 1 and option 2 differ in detail. Is it, you think
Yes.
the intent would be to have one profile that caters for both, or 2 profiles? And I mean, in that case, you'd have to back off any mandatory kind of considerations, I think, if you were just going to have the one profile.
To be honest, I probably prefer 2 profiles because I think they have quite different intent. So I'd have a suggested specimen profile and an actual specimen profile, because I think there's some information that if you had a specimen, you absolutely should include. But if you don't have the specimen at hand and it's an intent, I don't think some of that would potentially even be relevant, potentially. But again, I don't think we've got to make that decision today, but I think it's a good question. And yeah, I guess in my mind, I think you'd probably start with the assumption they're different and then merge them if you aren't convinced after going through each of them, rather than assuming that they're the same and then trying to shoehorn it all into one. Any other questions? I just want to make it clear that we're not saying that option 3 and option 4 are not valid, and we're not saying we won't in future work on them. I think they will come up in Angus's work around reporting when we look at the reporting workflow, and that needs to cover not just the report, but probably needs to talk about fulfillment more generally. And I think I might have mentioned this last time, that there can be a variety of outputs that get generated associated with fulfillment of a request. It might be things like you could have booking information surfaced through the output of a fulfillment. So it would kind of be the first stage, say for imaging, is that you need to potentially have a booking made prior to imaging being performed. The booking information that's associated with that booking can then be exposed as an outcome or output of the fulfillment, because it really is a part of that workflow. Again, we're not doing that today. Today was just to say, let's pick some scope for the requesting side of things, and we're kind of suggesting option 2 is kind of the main focus, and we think that option 1 has enough value add that we should bite off maybe both of these as the work that we do going forward. Does someone want to put forward a motion for the scope of eRequesting relative to specimens?
I'm happy to motion that we look at option 2 and option 1 as scope for eRequesting version 2.
I can second that.
All right, so we can go for a vote on that. All those that would like to abstain, raise your hand. Okay, looks like 2. You could now lower your hands. Thank you. All those that would like to vote negative, please raise your hand. Okay, no negatives. That would give us 15 for, 2 abstaining, and 0 negatives. Thank you, everyone. Bundles. Let's go on to that one. We've talked about bundles for, I think, 2 or 3 meetings, at least 2 meetings now. So for those who missed the first, I put forward an initial bundle approach. It, in effect, just accumulates the set of resources that we are requiring as part of the diagnostic request and captures them as a single profile within imaging and pathology as kind of 2 alternatives. The difference being at the moment really around the link to the appropriate code system or value set that constrains the coding. There is likely to be some further refinement of those over time because of maybe some of the lessons we're learning around the difference in implementation between imaging requests and pathology requests. And the question raised around consent is a good one in terms of including potentially in future in that bundle. Last week, a change was made to the bundle specifications to be more relaxed around the constraint around whether that bundle profile, which is a transaction bundle, was going to use puts or posts, and whether it should be looking to direct reuse of resources. So, for instance, where you have organizations, patients, practitioner roles, rather than recreating them in every transaction, it is possible to reuse between transactions. Angus raised a very good point, which was that there are some very good reasons why you don't reuse resources. And he thought that the initial examples of doing this should be very plain and simply have posts within the transaction bundle so that it, as kind of the default example, would create new resources within that transaction bundle each time. It's the safest and cleanest way of doing it because not everyone will necessarily understand the consequences of reusing resources between transactions. For instance, if you are creating if you're trying to reuse, say, a patient resource, and that patient has particular detailed contact information for one request that differs from another request, you don't want to be assuming that you can necessarily share that information. So I made those changes. They now, as the base example, just use posts. There is one imaging example of reusing resources, but it's clearly labeled that there are consequences for that reusing and that anyone using it should be well aware what the implication of that is. It's very likely that anyone who is implementing the eRequesting IG will actually end up profiling those bundles anyway and creating more specific constraints for their particular implementation. So you might find one provider of a eRequesting service locks down certain data to always be reused. So for instance, organization resources. Telstra Health would do that, and so would Magentis, I imagine. But that would still be completely consistent with the spec. It would just be a more constrained use of the spec. It would not be widening the profile, which would be an invalid thing to do. Does anyone have any questions about the example IG that was created? Should have the example. I should have the example in hand, but I don't. No questions? All make sense? All right. Just remember that this is not saying that this automatically is going into eRequesting 2.0. It's just saying that we all agree that this should be put forward in the draft and that it will be still subject to ballot when we get to ballot. But it does give us a chance to practice with these bundle specifications. Oh, excellent. Thank you, whoever did that. There's a branch which includes bundle. Can someone put that, can you put that link into the chat?
Oh, that's my local build, but I'll grab it and stick it in there.
Okay. Yeah, these are still subject to the ballot that we'll do next year, and so you will have a chance to question any of these, but it will give us a chance through connectathons to practice with these bundles going forward to figure out whether they actually make sense and are useful. Okay, does anyone want to motion for us to adopt this bundle approach at this point in time? Can I convince anyone?
I'm happy to move that we use this bundle approach. Is that what you're saying, Andy? That we'll refine it with editorial guidance and stuff like that?
Yeah, we'll refine it with editorial changes going forward. If there is any significant change that comes out through trying it out, we will bring that back to the project to discuss. We will also look to add to this bundle approach, this profile, as new artifacts get agreed to going forward. So for instance, at the moment, we're agreeing on the bundle without specimen because we don't have the specimen defined yet. When we define the specimen, we'll make sure that we have a vote to include not only the specimen approach in the IG, but also include it within the bundle in the IG and defining whether it should be mandatory in the bundle, optional in the bundle, etc.
I'm happy to second the motion.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you, Jai. All right, calling for the vote. Is there anyone that would like to abstain from the vote? Thanks, Michael. No abstentions. Anyone that would like to vote negative? Excellent. Unanimous.
Makes the maths easier. It's 15.
Indeed it does. Alrighty.
All the rest of them are watching the football, I think.
Who's playing at the moment?
USA and who was the other country? I don't know.
Oh,
Bosnia.
Bosnia,
That's
yeah.
Gabina, yes.
Yeah.
What's the score?
2-0.
Yeah, I think it's USA.
And no, I'm not watching.
Yeah.
I'm listening. It's on.
That
I've
was-
got one ear off.
That
Yeah.
was a trick question.
So Andy, if you've got anything controversial to put through, do it now.
That'd be mean. I guess that the last thing I wanted to do today was to begin to talk about how we're going to progress the transfer of fulfillment. I guess one of the first things, some may not consider this important, but I think from an optics perspective, it's actually can be quite a confusing concept. Transfer of fulfillment isn't really going to mean much to patients. And so we've kind of, having been living and breathing this for a year or so, or 2 years now, it is something that potentially has a huge value to, I think, what eRequesting offers, but describing it in a way where it's understandable by requesters, clinicians, by fillers, and by patients is actually quite complex. We don't want to, for instance, imply that this is somehow creating patient choice because it didn't exist before, because in a paper world, patient choice always exists. So you can't say things like, this approach is new because it gives patients choice. Everything we've done up to this point, there has always been patient choice. The challenge has been that there's nothing in our spec which enables a digital pathway with patient choice necessarily. And so what we're attempting to do is to provide a digital end-to-end experience, including the ability for patients to have a say in where they wish their diagnostic request to be fulfilled. So it may sound trivial, but I actually think that that wording is something we need to get right, because if we don't, it'll make our lives very difficult in prosecuting value going forward. I don't know if anyone has any commentary about that.
Completely agree. I think there's some opportunities here within this technical space to start to think about how we bring a broader awareness to what we're doing and ensuring that it aligns with that language and intent. And I think in terms of simplifying the language, that's certainly the simplest way to frame it. We just need to balance, I guess, the way it's described versus the need technically. But no, completely agree with what you're saying, Andy.
Yeah, so I kind of latched on to transfer fulfillment, and in some ways it was like, Esperanto, great concept, but no one ever kind of went, "Oh, I love Esperanto, isn't it wonderful?" So we at Magenta started talking about this as digital patient choice, to try and differentiate it from patient choice, the general umbrella of patient choice, which kind of needs to exist and always has existed in the paper world. So being very specific, this is about the digital pathway and patient choice within that space. So that's my latest.
It's an easier, I was only going to add, Andy, that it's a much easier workflow at a collection centre if it's digital, because at the moment they often recreate the order, right, in their own local system, which creates additional paperwork and time and so on and so on and so forth. So if we can do this digitally, it'll mean, I would assume, that request just gets accepted within that centre and away they go. So there's no additional paperwork, which would be a shorter workflow, better.
It would. It's interesting, and especially in not so much pathology, but in radiology, it's interesting how, even though there is a digital version of the content available, it's interesting how many radiology providers, the staff automatically re-enter and recreate the request from the paper because there is paper. It
happens in pathology too. On a personal basis, it happened to me just about 2 weeks ago, so it does happen in path too.
Yeah, it's hard to break the habit, I think, and in some ways you can kind of understand because they, instead of having these two pathways, they'd rather have one that they always do, and they just ignore, even though there are inefficiencies and they have to retype and stuff, they would rather just everything be the same. It takes up less brain space in some ways to do it. So yeah, it's just, I guess, something we need to be aware of with that. I think some of the other discussions I've been having with Angus around this is because originally I had talked about separating the splitting of requests from the digital patient choice. And the reason I did that was that in pathology, the splitting of requests is really not a common outcome. So the pathology fulfillment tends to hide any kind of sendaways or handing off work to other labs to do for you. They hide that behind the service that the pathology provider gives you. Whereas
I was only going to say, Andy, the only issue with that is based on work that I've done is that then sometimes you get combined reports, sometimes you get separate reports, and sometimes, so there are issues around sendaway still in terms of reporting.
Yeah, I think there's lots of issues, and I know Jai would probably have some commentary around the whole nature of these hidden sendaways, because and ultimately in terms of the MBS funding for this, that there isn't always a complete picture of the requests as they live within the original order intent. So by making the sendaways more explicit and visible, then you don't kind of have these hidden information sets.
And there's an increased risk of lost results as well.
True. I think in
because
general,
often the send-away tests take longer to complete because they're specialized tests, and so they might not get back to the patient.
that's a good call, because I think we, in general, by making the requesting process and fulfillment processes more transparent, and especially transparent to the patient, then you get better trust that you see exactly what's going on. So everyone should know that the report you might get might still be waiting on a send away that hasn't completed yet, for instance. So I do think the interesting bit is that radiology kind of need this splitting and kind of their equivalent of a send away anyway. So it kind of comes for free for pathology if we're going to be covering both radiology and pathology. If we've got to do it for radiology, then it's there and available. There's then probably an argument for how policy changes could help to create use of that going forward, so that there are better ways of ensuring that there is always a link to the original request, and you can see the pieces of fulfillment, even though they are being done separately, they always can be looked at as a whole, which I think would benefit all sorts of parts of the various workflows going on. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, I think we're probably also going to have a discussion around the splitting of requests, which in terms of digital patient choice is actually quite straightforward from a IG perspective. What is much more complex is how to actually implement it. But in some ways, it's not really the issue of the IG to tell you how to implement it. It's simply to say, here is the requirement for valid implementation. And that means you should be able to begin to support the partial completion and partial claiming of part of a request. And that means we're going to have to go back and revisit statuses and the role of the group status, because we never really talked about definitive algorithms for determining what the status of a group should look like if the pieces of the request actually have separate workflows, because they're being fulfilled potentially by different parties, and therefore they'll be at different stages. They might have different statuses. It may be that if you fail to complete one portion of a request, that should be made available again for completion by someone else. But what does the roll up of a status in a group look like now? And who decides what the group looks like? Because each individual fulfillment doesn't own the group. At the moment, we are implying that the filler will set both the task fulfillment on individual service requests and the task group status. But that whole mix is going to have to be rethought in light of multiple fulfillment.
I'll have to go back and check this, Andy. My understanding is, even though I said that they are split sometimes, if you know what I mean, that I believe the requirement is for them to be combined reports when the reporting is done. But I'll cross-check that.
Yeah, because it already applies in terms of different types of pathology. If you've got chemical pathology mixed with micro or anatomical, they're all on a different time scale.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any hard and fast rules around whether you can create interim reports.
Yeah.
So that then you could create a combined report at the end if you wanted to. But again, I think that's kind of left as an exercise to the filler in some ways. So we kind of need to talk about how specific we want to get with some of that stuff. But it is going to be, I think, a complex discussion that we will have around this. So my proposal is that probably at the next meeting, I'll have a chat to Angus, but I know Telstra Health want to do fulfillment. Oh, it's this digital patient choice. They haven't done it yet, but Angus is certainly active in implementing it in Sonic. So we can talk through the experience that we've had and some of the problems we've found with it. And then we're going to have to figure out how much we can we absolutely have to do and how much we can leave as an exercise to the reader, potentially, and how much is out of scope. So that's what we're going to do, and it'll take us a number of sessions to go through that going forward. I don't know, Michael, if you've got the date for the Spark testing event been? Was it this week?
What a great segue, Andy. Yes. So it's next week, the 8th of July on the Wednesday in Brisbane. If we're doing news and updates, I can quickly show you what we intend to do.
That'd be great.
So there's a number of scenarios. I think there's 5 in all. There's an eRequesting, eReferral workflow with provider lookup from the ADHA provider HCPD or provider directory, which should be available soon. There's a smart app launch track, patient summary exchange, medications dispense and reconciliation, and there's an appointments track there too. So the idea of this testing event is that people will have things to bring along, and it's just a matter of connecting it up, hopefully, because there's not a lot of time. It's only one day. The scenario I'm looking after is this referrals and requesting one. So hopefully we'll get some insights as to how much of eRequesting is also relevant for eReferrals, and get some insight into the Health Connect provider directory IG and how implementable that is. We've already got some people, so all of this is already full as far as participation goes. We've done the launch, the track launches and stuff like that. So well, hopefully we get some good information. We might even be able to test out some of those bundle profiles that Andy's produced as well. So hopefully I'll be able to report back on this at our next meeting. Any questions? Nope. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. I forgot to say that we'll also be, even though I said we're going to talk about digital patient choice next time we meet, Angus will also, I think, be back by then. And with luck, we might also have commenced the discussion around specimen content as opposed to just the scope. So given we have selected those 2 options, we will look to put up a kind of draft example of what those potentially 2 different profiles of use look like. And with extreme luck, we might be able to include specimen and bundle. I think bundle will be okay, but specimen as well at the Connectathon in Brisbane, which tickets have just been released. If you haven't checked in on it, does anyone recall dates? The 25th and 26th of August. So getting quick if you plan to come along. We'll look to have both bundle and specimen hopefully at that stage within the IG that we can try out. All right, that give you back say 15 minutes today, unless anyone's got any further questions. Any questions? No questions. Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, everyone. We shall see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Andy. Enjoy the land of the long white cloud.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, all.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, all.